we can really actually be a beacon for the rest of the world in really leading the way, not only in producing and finding these resources, but also in creating, manufacturing, refined products, and really lead the way in that sense. So that's what the center is about, is really finding these resources and enthusing people, getting excited about it.
Hi, and welcome to Wonder, the Planet Earth podcast for curious people. I'm Holly Cook, joined as always by fellow Earth scientist Dr. Anthony Reid. Now, guys, today is a really exciting day for the Wonder podcast because, Anthony, we have made some spectacular new friends. We're really honoured to be joined by them all in studio today. They've flown in from all corners of the country. It's officially time to introduce the Centre in Critical Resources for the Future. Now, this is an industrial transformation training centre funded by the Australian Research Council, and opposite us today is the amazing director of that centre, Professor Marco Fiorentini. Now, guys, before we launch really into this really special series we've curated for you guys, I just want a couple minutes of clear air. I want to G up this. I want to have a bit of a build up and set some context for these conversations. So bear with me both while I open up to you about what I think this landscape of resources in Australia looks like. So, Anthony, you and I talk a lot about nature and about Earth knowledge and how conversations about the Earth are important for really understanding ourselves and our human moment. So I like to situate human life in the broad sweep of deep time, among the vibrancy of our oceans, mountains, deserts, towering peaks, because inhabiting that vastness is the planet's youngest force of nature, humankind. Now, humankind has long turned to the Earth to sustain and build the tools of life, from stone axes to lapis lazuli jewellery to the first bricks of ancient Roman cement or Indigenous Australian boomerangs, fish traps. Humans are long carvers of nature, but today, more than ever, the natural world and natural resources are crutches of modern human life. And what a big conversation that is to have. So I'll say it with my whole chest. Important stories aren't just distillations of technical science. Important stories charter knowledge and habitation of human Earth spaces. And one way I would like to bring those stories to life with you, Anthony, is in partnership with the really spectacular scientists at the forefront of the Australian minerals and metals story, at the forefront of Australian Earth stories. We ask questions like, what are the ancient geological reasons why Australia is so resource rich? Why are these resources at all? And what do these critical resources mean for moving together into Australian Earth futures? So with that, I'm going to sort of take a back seat. I'm going to introduce Professor Marco Fiorentini. How are you, Marco?
I'm very well, and I'm so excited to be here. Thank you so much.
Oh, it's such a pleasure to have you in studio.
Good on you, Marco. Hey, so I know you're a professor at the University of Western Australia, but maybe you could give us a bit of a background on how you got to be there and what sort of interests do you have in the geology space?
Well, I think I wouldn't be able to put it in better words than Holly used just a few minutes ago about, I clearly remember the vastity of oceans and the towering peaks of mountains. So I've always been fascinated by the beauty and the complexity of our planet and more broadly speaking, about the universe that surrounds us. So I've always been drawn to it, always been drawn to living outside the open air, looking at what surrounds us. So people may not realize, but I'm actually from Italy originally. So been here
just to clarify,
a quarter of a century. So 25 years was not enough to get rid of that
Would
accent.
Not want to get rid of that accent, Marco.
But basically, yes, I did most of my undergraduate and training in Italy, which is, geologically speaking, very much in your face. It's really incredibly beautiful. But I willingly wanted to come to Australia because I think that Australia is really the mecca for geology and for, appreciating, understanding the beauty and the history of our planet. So yeah, that's why I'm here, and that's why I'm excited to have a conversation with you.
Oh my goodness. Having an Italian describe Australia as the Mecca is a wonderful turn of tables. Well, so as a research scientist, Marco, I would imagine you've asked some fascinating research questions over your years. What do you spend your time, as that curious scientist, what do you spend your time thinking about?
Well, I spend most of my time thinking about how little we know. And I love the fact that this podcast is about curiosity because, geology provides endless opportunities to be curious.
Yeah.
Because basically we know absolutely nothing. So when I came, I wanted to come to Australia because maybe we can talk about that later, but Australia provides us with the entire geological history of the planet. It's all recorded there. So if you want to understand something about how we evolved, where we come from, where we are heading, Australia is a great archive to know all of that.
Yes, and being in Western Australia, you know a lot about some of those ancient rocks. What are some of the ancient rocks you've worked in?
Yeah, ancient rocks. I've been working a lot on strange-looking ancient magmas known as komatiites. Komatiites, I always feel a little bit,
tingle. I think I got the same.
I feel you get that.
The same.
So komatiites are magmas that most likely erupted under primordial oceans and that reflect, the baby stages of our planet, when our planet really was still just a baby, as I said, was just deciding which way to go. Komatiites were erupting, and komatiites still reflect nowadays, tell us so much about the earliest stages of basically, half of the history of our planet is recorded by the emplacement of these komatiites that, by the way, also host some of the critical resources we're going to talk about today.
Sure, absolutely.
Yeah, fantastic.
Yeah.
And well, that's a really great lead then into, from that's just Wonder Podcast, going from ancient weird lavas to modern resources. So you are at the helm. You're the director of this new Centre in Critical Resources for the Future. What do those words even mean, Marco?
So criticality, it's a term that has become, I think it's probably even overused. We talk about criticality quite a lot, but in technical terms, critical elements, critical metals are those metals that are critical to specific uses in modern day society, and in order to tackle some of the big problems that are upon us. So criticality stands because these resources suffer from the problem of not being widely accessible. And economically speaking, there are risks of supply that may impinge on their availability. So from a point of view, there is something to say about the economics, but from a point of view of Earth and nature and chemistry, the critical metals are, like every other element, represented on the periodic table, and we look at it. The concept of criticality changes over time depending on the uses metals and elements are made of or are used for. So that is mostly what I refer to as criticality.
Yeah, fascinating. So the criticality and the idea of what a resource is almost entirely a human one. Like at the end of the day, there is a concentration of something that the Earth has over millions of years provided for us in 2025. But the idea of a critical resource is a human overlay. It's an overlay of what's going on in the world at the time, where you find these different minerals, whether you can even extract the metal from the mineral at all. So there's a real human element, it sounds like, to that resource.
Absolutely. And from an historical point of view, it's so interesting to go back in time and to see how elements that we nowadays wouldn't deem to be critical at all were so incredibly important in the past. So it's actually, there is a story around the cost and the value and the price of commodities through time that really is dependent about the technological advances and the fashions of the time.
I'm even thinking back to when I was first started talking about stone tools, for example. We don't want to overcook the analogy, but it really is humans return to Earth to build tools and to build things that help us live our lives today. We just live very big lives today in 2025, but we're still returning back to the Earth, and we have to return, or should I say, build an understanding of the Earth so that we can develop the resources that we need. So what are we talking here? Because humans can use concrete, but we can also use the nickel in the komatiites. So what are some of these what are some of these materials and minerals and metals that we can be using from the earth, and particularly in Australia?
Well, as I was saying before, Australia is amazing because it has that wide spectrum, basically the entire spectrum of metals and elements available on the planet are represented in Australia. So Australia is a depository of critical metals, if you wish. Something that may not be as known to the wider public is that Earth, basically through geological processes that may take different time or different times, actually remobilizes, concentrates, and recycles elements and metals that were around much before Earth became a planet. So these elements, these metals, were most likely formed in stars.
Lovely.
Especially, I'm thinking about some of the metals like platinum group element, platinum, gold.
Yeah.
Some of these heavy metals have been around for much longer than our Earth was. So metals came together during the accretion, the formation of our planet about 4.5 billion years ago. And ever since then, like a ginormous puzzle, Earth has been working hard to concentrate and dissipate these metals into small amounts of concentrations that humans then, through time, have tried desperately to look for.
Yeah, so it sounds a lot like we had an episode a couple of episodes ago. We're talking about earthquakes and how you can find order among chaos. That kind of sounds like what we're talking about. You go from like a primordial universe, you birth these metals into existence, and they happen to be in a mineral system on Earth right now, but they're actual. What they are is much more ancient even than you and I as geologists think about.
Exactly.
Every time I have to get in an old joke with Anthony.
Well, it was a very funny joke, I must say.
Oh, gosh. So it's becoming, I think it's then becoming clear that a resource relies on an understanding of Earth. So we don't need to go back necessarily to the stars. I love that you've brought that in, though. So we don't need to go back to the stars, but we do need to come back to the ground and understand Earth in the highest possible sense. Marco, what do we need to ask questions about to begin to find or understand or figure out how these metals come to be distributed throughout the Australian continent?
Yeah. First of all, there is a level, I've been saying that Australia is this amazing continent that preserves and contains most of the periodic table. That didn't come as a chance. So Australia had a specific geological history that led to it becoming what it is. I always make this analogy of a ginormous library whereby Australia has every single book that was ever printed since the beginning of planet Earth times. Yeah. Most other countries have a few books, a few chapters of a book. Italy has a few in itself. Got some cool chapters. Very cool chapters. These really nice chapters, but Australia has all chapters. So that is exciting. But what is even more exciting, and maybe people don't really fully realize that, is that resources are not everywhere and for us to stumble across and just use them. And I think that there is a bit of a sense of we actually give these things for granted. We think that we have everything we need to lead the life we live nowadays. And very few people realize that this is a struggle, because in order to find these resources that help us building the technology that we need and do and carry out the lives that we want, we need to work hard to find them. And the situation is becoming a little bit more challenging, because if you can think about, we've been looking for resources for the past few thousand years. So all the easy targets have been kind of found. So we need to get smarter. And that's what it's exciting about the center that I'm a director of. We are trying to enthuse future young geologists to get smart and look for these resources in an innovative, environmentally conscious, and really efficient way.
In a future-facing way.
In a future-facing way, because it's not about, people may have heard it's it's difficult, so we should just give up, or we can buy the resources elsewhere. It's not about that. It's about how can we make the most of what we have. We know that we have an incredibly endowed library. We can look for any chapter or book we want. Why not really get into finding these books? And really, we can really actually be a beacon for the rest of the world in really leading the way, not only in producing and finding these resources, but also in creating, manufacturing, refined products, and really lead the way in that sense. So that's what the center is about, is really finding these resources and enthusing people, getting excited about it.
Mm-hmm. It's two sides of the same coin. Like it's, I don't feel like I have to be told to be enthusiastic about where resources are, because I know that my bleeding heart, just all I want to do is understand how the earth works. And if in that pursuit of understanding how the earth works, and particularly how it's worked and changed through time, that's how you do it. So Marco, we were having a chat and you said something that I loved it, and I would like to explore it with you more. And that is that these resources can be a symptom.
They're symptomatic
of Earth behavior.
Yeah, exactly.
What do you mean?
Well, it's actually, if you think about that, the movement and concentration of different type of metals require changes in temperature, in pressure, in overall conditions that favor or disfavor the mobility of these elements. So whenever we find an anomalous concentration of a specific metal, say we normally know it as a gold deposit or a nickel deposit, something that is really not average, we need to ask ourselves why this specific anomalous concentration is there, when did it form, and really why? Because by understanding why, we understand how and what the planet was doing at that specific moment in that specific area. And that's not just, just because. It's because by collating all of these little snapshots of they are really actually snapshots. We know what the gold deposit what Earth was doing when it was producing that gold, what Earth was doing when it was producing that nickel. If we actually puzzle it over and we put that complex puzzle together, we can understand and represent and picture the evolution of our planet in space and time. And that is something that we need to be better prepared to understand how the planet may evolve in the future. It may actually help us be better equipped on finding other similar resources and really have that comprehensive understanding of our, home.
Fantastic, Marco. What are some of the challenges that people are facing now? Firstly, in trying to explore for these types of resources.
Well, there are some technical challenges that are not trivial, because these resources are very often concealed. They are deep. They are difficult to find. They are cryptic. Some of the models that we use, technology we use, becomes obsolete very fast, very quickly. But I think the single biggest problem that we have is really getting people enthused to really put their head together to understand how these systems work. Because I do think that we're not living to our best potential. We can do so much more with so little. Because a lot of the conceptual understanding of how these systems work, I have in front of me samples from a copper-bearing and a molybdenum-bearing geological systems that are just in front of me. The green one is the copper side of things, the molybdenum, the silvery one is the molybdenum. We want to understand why and where and the size of these resources, but a lot of it, we spend millions in trying to measure them, document them, but in relative terms, we spend very little time in thinking about how they formed and how we could use that thinking to find more of it.
Mm-hmm.
So that's where we could and where we're trying. I mean, it's not that we're not trying, but
sure.
we could do so much better in that space.
So the copper and the molybdenum in this example, they don't appear kind of randomly, and you can't just go out to any old rock anywhere in your backyard.
Big country. You can't just walk around and
these things.
Yeah, there's order to where they occur.
Yeah, there's order. So we were trying to look at and understand the underlying systems that produce this type of very strange, quite a bizarre rock.
But you know what is, even to me specifically, what is most exciting is the fact that in the past, a lot of the research has gone into understanding how the green rock forms.
Mm-hmm.
So there is all the people that study green rocks. And then there are the people looking at how the silvery rock works.
Mm-hmm.
And these communities very often work in isolation, as if these systems were not part of a continuum. Mm-hmm. We do know in every other single science, go from biology to physics to chemistry, that Earth, that nature is a continuum. Mm. So a lot of the research we're trying to do here in the center is understanding the commonalities between these systems. What can I learn about the green rocks by understanding this better, and vice versa? And I am completely convinced that by creating these patterns and links, we can actually join the dots and find so much more, because we could understand how these things are genetically and spatially related with each other.
Amazing.
That is goosebumps. Like sitting here, not just as a podcast co-host, but sitting here as a PhD student listening to this scientific thinking, I'm just so proud to be part of a community that asks questions like this. It's a remarkable thing what you just said, Marco. Nature exists as a continuum, and we can silo disciplines and we can silo questions, but the truth is it's linked, and that makes it complicated, and it means that we need a hell of a lot of enthusiasm and rigor with our questions, which it sounds like these questions around mineral systems, these questions around where metals are, they're holistic within this centre. And in case we haven't made it clear, the kinds of resources in particular that we'll be chatting about in this partnership is the metals. It is the minerals and metals. So Marco, the age-old question the roaring debate I have in my head when I often read a news headline: what is the difference between a critical mineral and a critical metal?
So a critical metal is, a metal is a type of element that sits within that periodic table we were talking about, whereas a mineral is basically the host for that specific metal. Mm-hmm. So as we like to say, critical metals could be hosted in different types of minerals. Mm-hmm. And it's for us to understand which are the minerals that are more conducive to hosting the largest amount of these metals. Mm-hmm. So it's an important difference, because at the end of the day, when you find a deposit and you have to extract the critical metals from the rock, you need to deal with the minerals that make up that rock. Mm-hmm. So the two things are intimately connected, but they're separate.
Yeah. And important for not just a geological conversation, but a metallurgical conversation, how we mine these things, because, I really want to dwell on what you said, which is future-facing resources. Yeah. I think Australia has an incredible capacity to be a leader in how we view, discover, process, etc. Our technological capability could be immense, but the key part of that is doing it in a future-facing way. And part of that, minimizing the effects of how we mine, minimizing and sort of optimizing what resources leaves behind on the landscape, comes to an understanding of the rocks, not just, yes, the big picture questions, the big continuum of nature, but also being precise about how we understand this big thing so that we can get out the rare earths that go into our technology later on.
You're spot on, Ollie, and this is very much what our center is about, is actually looking at all the disciplines and ideas that can be used to really look and facilitate the process of identification, extraction, and rehabilitation of different systems that we want to get critical metals from. Mm-hmm. So the whole aspect of understanding the mineralogy and understanding how we can extract metals from minerals in using the least amount of resources, say water, electricity,
other critical
and
resources.
other critical resources that are in that we don't have a lot of. So we want to understand how that all fits together. And interestingly, by doing this geometallurgical work right, this is not intuitive, but by understanding more about how these metals are hosted within the minerals and the rocks, you can use that information to feed back to the basically understand how this system formed in the first place. So it's like a bit of a virtuous circle we can look at.
Yeah, and the scales that you go through as well, because you're looking at the nanoscale, individual metals and substitution within other kind of lattices.
Yeah.
And then you're bringing that right up to the scale of a mineral itself, which you can see like visually within your rock sample. Then you might scale it even further, and you're looking at an entire feature in the landscape, which is related in some way to how where these metals might be deposited. Indeed, you could go even deeper into the depths of the bowels of the earth, if you like, where these things might have been sourced from as well. So that's one of the great things about it. I'm sure you would agree that we're crossing a lot of scales there.
I totally agree with you. And the beauty and the excitement here is that we have the technology to do so. Up until a few years ago, we could actually not have the technology. Now we go from the atom scale, as you were just saying, to understand how a continent fits the bigger scheme of things. So talking about back about the continuum and our desire to box things and make sense of it, I think that this is common to all sciences, trying to deal with the complexity with our limited human brain. It's by boxing things that we try to make order and try to navigate complexity. But really, the future is really deal with complexity and be comfortable with it and really join those dots. I think that's what is the excitement here.
Absolutely. Well, that's just, it's really just how our natural systems work. It's wonderful to look at things in isolation. You can boil down principal foundations, you can boil down foundational understandings, but to reconstruct geology, to reconstruct the universe, that requires an interconnectedness that is found in ambiguity. It's found in being uncomfortable. It's found in your opening words, which is, I think about how much we don't know, and I love it.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. So amidst our conversations about Australian resources, I'm actually just curious on a bit more of a higher scale. What is the opportunity for Australia here? We live in an interesting time at the moment. Where is the opportunity for the Australian country with our fantastic endowment of geological resources?
The opportunity here is to bring geoscientists to work together in a much more coherent, cohesive, and exciting way. Because as we were just talking a second ago, nature is complex. Australia is incredibly complex and logistically challenged, given the size, the remoteness, and the difficulty in infrastructure. But we know we have the most amazing geology, so we know that we have that endowment that we can count on. Many countries worldwide don't have that. So we know we have the commodity, we have the critical metals. So the future, the excitement here is how do we look for these systems in a much more surgical way? How can we apply our knowledge to really surgically find these resources and take them to production in a sustainable and in a sustainable way. So we have the resources, we have the people, we have the excitement. So we have all the ingredients. We just have to make it happen. And the center is testament to, the ARC, the Australian Research Council, that amidst all this, uncertainty, global uncertainty, has decided to find a center that really tries to do that, create a fertile environment where people can come together and have fun carrying out the science they want to. So that's from my perspective, the future and the excitement that is upon us.
Yeah, I want to be a part of that future. I think I am actually with my PhD.
You
I'm
kind of am.
gum
Yeah,
on
you
the
are,
shoe.
Holly.
So, okay, with our last couple of minutes, Marco, I now need to delve into just a bit of geology with you. I
Yeah.
can't have you sitting in front of me and not talk about rocks,
Yeah.
Marco. So, you've analogized Earth history as a library, and Australia has every book ever printed.
Yeah.
Can we read some books quickly? What are the Australian books here?
Oh, I mean, how much time do we have here? It's just like 2 minutes.
Not much.
Okay, so I mentioned the Command. Okay, I'll try to use faster. So we want to see how Earth took its first steps, the baby steps. We look at the Komatiites, fantastic Komatiites. We want to understand when, why, and where the atmosphere of our planet became oxygenated.
Wow.
We have rocks that really fingerprint that stage from when Earth was devoid of oxygen to when it became oxygenated.
Mhm.
And that coincides with the largest iron resources in the world. The baby steps coincide with some of the largest nickel reserves in the world. We want to look at, we want to look at the earliest evidence of life on the planet. We have that book with stromatolites from Western Australia dating back to 3.5, 3.8 billion years, actually 3.5. We want to see the oldest evidence of meteorite impacts. That is actually research from Western Australia just a couple of weeks ago. Mm-hmm. We have that chapter.
Cool.
We want to find the oldest mineral grains known as zircons that really point to the first time when Italy started. Oh, was a bit of a lapsus, but Earth was actually crystallized. So we go to a specific area in Western Australia where you can find these specific grains and minerals. So really, it's you can actually sit and go from day one. I think it was a Thursday, by the way. I've been told that it was a Thursday, till about today, which is a Monday. So in a couple of days, we will actually have the full cycle. But we have 4.5 billion years of history, basically all preserved in the most beautiful rocks we have on the planet.
Oh, Marco,
Fabulous.
What a treat. Well, Thursday to Monday might feel like 4 billion years, but this conversation felt like it flew. Yeah, that's some weeks in the life. But this conversation, Marco, was so fascinating. Thank you for taking the time. What a treat to have you in the studio, but also to be having these conversations with scientists in the centre like yourself. So thank you very much.
It was a real pleasure to be here. Thank you so much.